Good evening, everyone, and welcome to 60 and Beyond with Skylark on my channel, Skylark Live. I present this vlog the first Monday of each month, and I choose a topic that is very timely, something I'm thinking about, something I've experienced that I want to share with you. So on this first Monday, October 7th, 2019, this Monday of October. Tonight I'm going to talk about a pretty sober topic. It's called sudden loss. And if you've suffered a sudden loss either recently or in the past, I think that what I'm going to share may be of help to you. And I also want you to know that in no way do I profess to be a professional on this topic. I'm not a therapist. I am merely someone who started my vlog to share when I hit 60 and beyond. I'll be 62 this December. And the things that we start to go through at this age. And there are many, whether it's a shift in your personal life, in your professional life, in your relationship, in your marriage, whatever it is, a friend, a family member, I like to share so that maybe I can inspire to assist you in some way or to assist you in getting help for some things you may be going through. So I'm going to start. I have to wear these glasses because I cannot see a thing without them. So I'm going to start and I'm going to read quite a few notes that I found about sudden loss. Grief affects us all in different ways. With the loss of a loved one, grieving is a necessary part of the healing process. We all know that. When the loss is sudden, the grief can be devastating. Sudden loss and predictable loss are felt in different ways, and the sudden grief can be profound. So sudden loss. Sudden events that take loved ones away from us can be extremely painful, such as car accidents, crime, suicide, and other types of unexpected deaths can result in the feelings of sudden loss. The grief of an unforeseen passing of a loved one can leave you reeling. Common reactions to this type of loss include insomnia, nightmares, depression, social isolation, or anxiety. Many people in the face of sudden loss will attempt to avoid everyday scenarios in an attempt to avoid a similar fate. So in other words, if something horrible happened, you may suddenly feel that it could happen to you. For example, it isn't uncommon for the child of a spouse of someone who passed away in a car accident to fear driving. Whether this behavior ends up being long or short term, it is our grief combining with our survival instincts. Sudden loss affects us differently than predictable loss, which refers to the death of a loved one, with the expectation of it happening. While awful to think about, we know deep down that as our loved one ages, it is more likely for them to pass away, such as a parent. Their passing is no less painful, but mentally we are more prepared for this kind of loss. In some cases, the grief settles in before the loved one's passing, in mounting anticipation of the loss. For some people, when the loss is anticipated for so long, the grief lessens once their loved one has passed. This is completely normal, especially if your loved one has been suffering for a long time. Now we're going to talk a little bit about mourning sudden loss. In cases of sudden loss, the mourning process can be extremely painful. We are told to expect the unexpected, but we never truly expect this. Loss that comes as a sudden shock to us can be harder to overcome. The mourning period for sudden losses are often much longer. People who are significant and central to our lives can provide us with an immense feeling of security and purpose. When these people die, it can cause us to feel lost and directionless at a time when we are suffering immense emotional pain due to our bereavement. Now we'll talk about suddenly bereaved people are affected by their own life stories. Everyone is unique, with a unique life story. I've often said that in other blogs. And I often say, tell your story. It's good to talk about it. Anyone's ability to cope with the sudden death or of someone close is likely to be shaped partially by that life story. And it's important when caring for a person who has been suddenly bereaved to have at least a basic understanding of their life story to enable appropriate empathy to be provided. Different life stories mean that sudden bereavement can be hard to bear for different reasons. People who have had poor relationships in the past, this is interesting. For example, an unloving childhood or failed relationships may find it particularly difficult to cope when someone special dies suddenly with whom they had a very good relationship. They may find it hard to imagine ever experiencing such a special relationship again because their experiences have taught them that good relationships are hard to find. People who have always experienced good relationships and who have no experience of being suddenly bereaved may find it extremely challenging to make sense of the world anymore when someone special dies suddenly. They've no experience of such things happening in their world, so the shock can be enormous. People who have previously been suddenly bereaved and then moved on in their lives may find it particularly hard to bear if it happens again. Having to experience sudden bereavement repeatedly may mean these people find it hard not to have a depressive view of the future. So there can be no doubt that sudden bereavement is challenging for a range of different people with different life stories. Every sudden death is unique and traumatic. And every sudden death is different, but all are traumatic and therefore challenging. A death may be witnessed by the bereaved person, and the bereaved person may have been powerless to prevent the death. For example, a father forced to watch his child drown, how unfortunate and horrible, but unable to rescue his child because of strong waves, and they would be risking their own life. A bereaved person may have been involved in the event that caused the death, for example, a road crash. In such circumstances, the bereaved person may also be recovering from injuries or caring for another injured family member. The bereaved person in some circumstances may have even caused the death of their loved one, for example, by driving dangerously. Alternatively, a bereaved person may not have been at the scene of the death. They may be told about the death secondhand, for example, by a police officer telling them their loved one has been taken or has taken their own life. A bereaved person may have suffered multiple bereavements at once. This is also not uncommon following a road crash, but that's just a particular example. We're really tonight focusing on the sudden death of one person. I would think. A bereaved person may have suffered the sudden serious injury of a loved one, which then led to a lingering death in a hospital, where the death was either inevitable or there was hope of recovery, and then death. These are real topics, everyone. You know, these are real things that we're going to be going through, and it's real, and it's something that I think about and I'm concerned about, my own ability to navigate through it, and something recent that had happened, and so I'm hoping that whoever watches this may understand a little bit more of this sudden death scenario and how it can affect you, and a little later how you can help yourself. Many people working in the field of trauma and caring for people who are traumatized define a traumatic event as an event that involves the traumatized person or which was witnessed by the traumatized person. In both cases, the defining factor is that the traumatized person was present at the event. Such descriptions of trauma are alienating for people who have been bereaved by a sudden death, but who were not present at the time of death, as these people are excluded from the descriptor. In the case of sudden death, the defining factor that makes the death traumatic and the bereaved person's response to that death complex is not that the bereaved person was present at the scene of the death, The defining factor is that the death was sudden, very unexpected, unanticipated, and was of someone very close. Another common defining factor of many sudden deaths is that the death was violent or involved extensive pain or fear, or was all three. Again, these elements add to the traumatic nature of the bereavement, regardless of whether the bereaved person was present or not. So, sudden death, sudden loss is a very traumatic event, and it affects our the part of our system, our limbic system, which is in the center of the body. It's in the stomach area, which forms even before the brain during in vitro, and hormones and signals are in the center. Like you get that gut feeling, that is the part of the body that reacts to sorrow. You get nauseous. Some people get sick, they throw up, or they have to empty their bowels. These are all very primal, natural reactions to a sudden shock to the system. And as many of you are watching, you may have experienced this, and that is why the limbic system is reacting in that case. So, I did a lot of research on what to do, to help heal yourself, and what I do when I'm feeling sad or in shock or depressed, or I've lost someone and I'm feeling so sad. I think talking to a grief counselor or any kind of counselor is probably the first step. That might be a really good idea to start really talking about it. Maybe you're not ready right away, but eventually that talk therapy can really be incredibly healing. Surround yourself with friends and family. It's very, very natural to want to isolate, and maybe you need to do that for a period of time. But eventually it's really better or advised to surround yourself with people who love you and who you love. Maybe get involved in some yoga, meditation, walking in nature, going to the beach, a place where you are in total nature, natural element, where you're not interacting with anyone. You don't have to interact with anyone, even though it's a form of isolation. It's more solitude than it is isolation. So we all know a walk in nature is so soothing and so healthy for us. I know it's something that I do, and it helps me a lot. Go to church, go to the synagogue, go to a mosque, whatever your religious calling is. Talk to a religious leader, it may help you as well. Acceptance, forgiveness, which may come a little later because there's a lot of sorrow and anger and why did this have to happen, and so many emotions that happen all at once. But good self-care is really, really important. Eating well, getting good sleep if you can, feeling your pain, not denying it, forgiving yourself is a big one. Face your feelings, maybe write in a journal. I've talked about grief and loss before on my blog, but this is going a little deeper tonight. This is more traumatic than sudden loss. And try to maintain some interests eventually that might take your mind off of this very, very sad sudden loss. So, let me see if I have anything else that I wanted to share. Some exercise, keep moving, engage in, I think I mentioned hobbies that you may love. And as I always say, go out into the night sky and look up. When you get down, look up, the sky is magic in it. So that is it for my October 7th, 2019 vlog. I wish you well. Be sure you tell your loved ones how much you love them. And stay present. Stay as present as you possibly can. Try not to go to the what ifs, what I could have done, what I should have done, oh, I wish I had, oh, I should have. Those are kind of useless, really. Just stay focused on your grief, your through your grief, and your healing. And I'm sending love to all of you. And I will see you next month. And that's it for 60 and Beyond with Skylark. Share my information if you like to your friends, and have them subscribe to my Skylark Live channel. It'd be great to share with more people. Good night, everybody. Have a beautiful evening.